Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Unfortunately, we got some bad news earlier today, Steelers Nation, as DK Metcalf is now officially suspended for 2 games, which means for the rest of the regular season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to be breaking down that news at the top of today's show. Then we'll get into my film takeaways from Week 16, yesterday's win versus the Detroit Lions, offense and defense. And if you guys want actual film examples from what we're going to talk about on today's show, my film study examples are up on my X account at Jack_Sperry. Fortunately, we can't put up those clips here on YouTube or else we'll get demonetized, but we can't put those up on X. So if you guys give me a follow on X at Jack_Sperry, you guys can see all of my film study analysis every single week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I greatly appreciate all the support you guys give to me there on that platform. So we'll get right into the news here from Tom Pelissero earlier today, just past 4 p.m., saying the NFL is suspending Steelers wide receiver DK Metcalf 2 games without pay for physically confronting a Lions fan during Sunday's win at Detroit. Per sources, Metcalf, who had reported the same fan to security last season when he was playing with the Seahawks, plans to appeal. Now, obviously, guys, 2 games means that is for the rest of the regular season. The Pittsburgh Steelers, although they have a 2-game lead in the division with 2 games left to go, the division is not all the way locked up yet. And, for DK to not be out there, that is a little bit concerning. But, hopefully DK can win his appeal. And, there's some reason to believe that he might, if the reports coming out that, this fan was calling him and his mother some pretty disgusting things. And that gets confirmed, or all that, or any of that. DK finds some video evidence that happened. Maybe that gets this down to a game, and he would be able to play against the Baltimore Ravens if the season is on the line for that particular game. Chad Ochocinco went on his podcast yesterday, and he said that he got word that this fan was saying some pretty nasty stuff to DK Metcalf, not condoning the behavior or anything like that. But Chad said yesterday, I got word. Obviously, I'm not condoning putting your hands on a fan or punching a fan, but he did call Metcalf a racial slur. He called him the N-word, and he did call his mom a C-word. I think with those words being exchanged and the fan saying that, that's where the action occurred. Now, the fan, to be fair to him, completely denies those allegations. And to be clear, Metcalf himself has not spoken to the media or released a statement or anything like that. So it's not Metcalf making those allegations. It's Chad Ochocinco that's making those allegations. And with those allegations being put out there over the last 24 hours, Ryan Kennedy, who is the fan that Metcalf interacted with yesterday, put this statement out regarding that, saying Ryan Kennedy categorically denies using hate, N-word, the C-word, or any racial, misogynistic, or hate-based slur during the incident that occurred on December 21st, 2025 at Ford Field during the Pittsburgh Steelers-Detroit Lions game. These allegations are completely false. So I'm sure the NFL during this appeal process will go over any and all video evidence of the incident, and they'll come to a decision as to whether to keep the 2-game suspension or to reduce it to just 1 game or potentially just a fine. But there's certainly reporting out there right now that Metcalf actually reported this fan to security at Ford Field last year when he was still playing for the Seattle Seahawks. It was a Monday Night Football game where Metcalf actually had a really good performance, but apparently this isn't the first time that he's had an encounter with that particular fan, so they have some history. So this fan is claiming that he just used his full name or something like that. Like, I really doubt that's all that was said to DK Metcalf, to have him come off the Steelers sideline, grab his shirt, and then shove him back into the stands. I mean, there had to be something really nasty that was said. Not saying that he used the N-word or the C-word, because we don't know that information as of now, but I find it hard to believe that Metcalf just came over just cuz and wanted to punch a Lions fan. That's just not something that people do. But because of this 2-game suspension now, the stakes have been raised for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week, all right? Because if the Pittsburgh Steelers don't get the division locked up this week, and in our earlier video today, we talked about the 2 ways that can happen. Either the Ravens lose to the Green Bay Packers on Saturday, or the Pittsburgh Steelers win versus the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. If neither of those two things happen, that means that the division is going to come down to Week 18 in Pittsburgh versus the Baltimore Ravens. And if this suspension sticks, that means DK Metcalf, your number one receiver, is not going to be on the field for that game. And Metcalf, as we know, was a big reason why the Steelers were able to beat the Ravens the first time around at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore. And if he doesn't play, that is going to significantly reduce the chances that the Steelers can win that football game and make the playoffs. But if Pittsburgh clinches the division this week, that second week of the suspension doesn't really matter, okay? And, the chances of the Ravens, maybe without Lamar Jackson, beating the Green Bay Packers this week on the road, I would say the Packers are probably favorited in that game. And then even without DK Metcalf, I think the Steelers are certainly favored against the Cleveland Browns as well. So I still find it pretty unlikely that the suspension is going to actually affect, the divisional race here. I still think the Steelers will win the division. They'll have that home playoff game this year. But certainly it puts some pressure on this week for the Steelers to seal the deal, especially if DK can't get this appeal figured out here, and he is suspended for these last 2 weeks. Now, a question that's going to arise now because DK is out for these next 2 weeks is, will and should the Pittsburgh Steelers sign a wide receiver now that Metcalf will be out of the lineup moving forward? Of course, Metcalf is your number one receiver. We've seen Thielen and MVS get a big-time increased workload here over the last several weeks. We saw Calvin Austin III get injured. He injured his hamstring yesterday, so he's another guy that could be out of the lineup here. Scotty Miller is somebody that I certainly expect to have an increased role. Same thing goes for Roman Wilson. Roman hasn't been getting a helmet lately, but with DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin III potentially both being excluded from the lineup moving forward, it's very possible, if not likely, Roman Wilson gets back into game action next week against the Browns. But if they are going to sign a wide receiver, I'd say the two guys to definitely keep your eye on are Allen Lazard and Odell Beckham Jr. All right, Lazard, obviously, because he's had a long-term kind of relationship in football with Aaron Rodgers here, of course, in Green Bay, then in New York. Had a pretty productive season last year. He was a starter for the New York Jets last season when Rodgers was the quarterback, and they certainly have a certain amount of chemistry with each other. He's currently a free agent, and he's a bigger body receiver, so he could take DK Metcalf's role as the X-wide receiver if that's what they're looking for. And then Odell Beckham Jr. said this offseason that he had some conversations with Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers about potentially signing here. Now, obviously, the Steelers have had a lot of opportunities to sign Odell this year and haven't. And Odell earlier this season had to serve a suspension for abusing the performance-enhancing drug policy of the National Football League. He's no longer serving that suspension. So that might be the reason why the Steelers didn't sign him, is because they didn't want to have to deal with a suspension. But now that suspension's been done by Odell Beckham Jr., maybe they think about bringing him in. Some other names to keep your eye on here if the Steelers look to bring in somebody. Jermaine Burton, a really talented receiver out of Alabama. The Cincinnati Bengals released him for behavioral type of stuff. He's not really a professional, but he is very talented. Ray McLeod, former Steeler here, for Steelers legend, could be coming back here maybe. He went to the New York Giants after being released by the Atlanta Falcons earlier this year. Then he gets cut by the Giants. He's currently a free agent. Deontay Johnson, kind of doubt that Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan bring him back because they traded him away for a reason. I'm sure that bridge might be burnt at this point. But Robert Woods is somebody that knows the playbook. If you're looking for somebody that can play this week, Robert Woods is somebody that obviously went through a full preseason and training camp with this team, has a little bit of established chemistry with Rodgers in practice. Maybe you can think about him. And then Nelson Aguilar, Tyler Boyd, DJ Chark, and Colin Johnson are some other free agency options you could think about adding to the team here with DK Metcalf likely to miss the next 2 weeks. But really, guys, I think that the more realistic solution here is you're asking Scotty Miller and Roman Wilson to step up. Now, obviously, neither of those guys are as big as DK Metcalf, but I think MVS probably takes DK's role at X, and then you probably see Roman or Scotty or somebody here take the Z role on the outside, and then Thielen, and then Scotty, Roman. There's going to be a little bit of rotation in the slot. That's probably going to be the rotation here until DK gets back in time for the NFL postseason. postseason. So Roman's got a hell of an opportunity here to show this team what he can do. We said that he probably wouldn't get a helmet for the rest of the season unless there was an injury. And not only was there an injury to Calvin Austin III, but now DK Metcalf is suspended. So that should give Roman Wilson a chance to get a helmet and show what he can do in the final 2 weeks of the year. But, I think the silver lining to this situation, guys, is that, you have a 2-game lead in the division. Thank God the Steelers won yesterday against the Detroit Lions. But, they're not super DK Metcalf dependent because they do spread the ball around. Like every single game, there's like 7 or 8 different players that catch the football. They spread the football around to a lot of different people, Calvin and Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith and Darnell Washington and Adam Thielen and MVS. Like they do have a lot of pieces that they use. Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Warren. They use a lot of these pieces, guys, and Rodgers throws it to the open guys. So although missing that number one piece is going to affect coverage and stuff like that, I'm sure we'll see a lot of man coverage from opposing teams as long as DK is out of the lineup, and you're going to have somebody step up when you get those man coverage looks. But this offense, I think, might be actually a little bit more built to take on a number one wide receiver suspension or injury than maybe last year's team that completely crumbled when George Pickens went down with a hamstring injury. Now, predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will Pittsburgh sign a wide receiver this week? And if so, which one do you think they bring in? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about a great opportunity to get a great piece of Steelers apparel just in time for Christmas. Well, I'll let you guys know about that opportunity. Answer today's pinned question down there in the comments. Now let's have word from our sponsor today, where you guys can get an awesome Steelers Salute to Service sweatshirt today, just in time for Christmas. If you've been procrastinating, you need to do some shopping for the Steelers fans in your life, you guys can go chatsports.com/pitsalute25. That link can be found in the comments and description of today's show. If you guys click that link and make a purchase, part of the proceeds go back to us here at Steelers Talk. And I really like the design of this year's Salute to Service gear, so I wanted to give you guys this awesome opportunity here. Go chatsports.com/pitsalute25 if you guys want to do some last-minute Christmas shopping for yourself or somebody that you love. So now let's get into my film takeaways here, guys. And I know you guys love these in-depth looks at my thoughts on the film. And, I think that, a lot of the things I thought about this game heading into the game or heading into the film today, I came away with a lot of the same thoughts, all right? So we'll start with the offensive side of the ball, where the Steelers are really embracing the spread with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback here down the stretch. We've seen a lot more empty personnel and a lot more spread formations, a lot more 11 personnel over these last several weeks. And then this week we saw a lot of spread formations, where over half of Aaron Rodgers' dropbacks this week came from an empty set. So they've definitely embraced this for Aaron Rodgers in this Steelers offense. And, the benefit of that, and the reason why I like this, guys, is because Rodgers can better diagnose what the defense is in when you spread things out and when you go empty, because, you got all these players lined up all across the formation. The defense, unless they want to be out of position, they need to kind of almost declare what they're doing to Rodgers pre-snap, and the more spread you get, Rodgers can kind of pick up on tendencies. And as we know, Rodgers is one of the most intelligent quarterbacks in National Football League history, so he can pick these defenses apart with his brain. And this is something that I've suggested all throughout this season when the Steelers were struggling to move the football, because what you're supposed to do as an offensive coordinator is play to the strengths of your players and play to the strengths of your quarterback in particular. And Aaron Rodgers' greatest strength at this point, at 42 years old, is no question about it, his all-time Hall of Fame caliber mind. And he can just pick apart these defenses. We've seen that here over the last several weeks. And then now that he's got his accuracy back, that's a combination that's going to be really tough for opposing defenses to fool down the stretch. But I think Rodgers is really elevating this group, and he has been elevating this group over the last several weeks. All right, you don't have a super dynamic wide receiver room or anything like that, but I think there's enough talent in that room. And then when you combine that with Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, and then what you get in the passing game from Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell, this is a very versatile passing attack, and defenses have to cover really every blade of grass against this Steelers team. And I think the way specifically Rodgers Steelers elevated the offense yesterday was he converted on 3rd and longs pretty consistently. Slightly less than 50% on 3rd and long yesterday were the Steelers, but that's a much higher number from a percentage than what we see in the National Football League. Like 3rd and long situations, guys, extremely low percentage situations in terms of conversions, but Aaron Rodgers did a really good job finding ways to convert on 3rd down, specifically getting the ball to his new safety blanket here, and Adam Thielen, who really showed up, on 3rd downs in particular in this football game. I believe he had 4 catches in this game, 3 of them coming on 3rd downs, and all of them were conversions on 3rd and long. So Thielen has really become that 3rd and long kind of 3rd down situation safety blanket where he's a big body that can also separate versus man. He can get physical in his routes, and then he can make those tough catches. He really showed off that zone IQ in a couple of examples. He made some tough catches. He beat man coverage on one of those 3rd and long situations, and he is somebody that has a skill set that this wide receiver room desperately needed. All right, DK, Roman, Calvin, they just weren't getting open enough versus man coverage in these 3rd and long situations. Having a guy like Thielen that can route somebody up in man coverage, somebody that's smart enough to sit down in the zone against zone coverage, and then somebody with good enough hands to make a tough catch in a tough spot on a big down. I think Rodgers really trusts him as a professional and as a veteran player. And the results speak for themselves. He converted 3 of those 4 3rd and long situations with Rodgers yesterday. So I think it's pretty safe to say Rodgers has his 3rd down favorite guy here. But then DK Metcalf, I thought the connection was kind of met in this one. There were some really good anticipation plays in this game. There was a curl route for a 1st down that Rodgers threw. I believe it was in the second half to DK, and then he threw like a 20-yard seed on a back shoulder on a 1st and 20 after a holding call to pick up a big 1st down. That was absolutely beautiful. And if you squinted on that play, it looked a lot like Aaron Rodgers back in 2021 throwing it to Devontae Adams. Like, it was just a thing of beauty, perfectly timed. But there was some missed opportunities in this game for sure, and it just seemed a little bit off in this football game. Certainly not the way it was, say, 2 weeks ago against the Baltimore Ravens. But I also thought the play-action rollout game was pretty weak this week. I didn't love this portion of the game plan from Arthur Smith. Detroit really sniffed it out pretty easily every single time they did a play-action rollout. So I think that the Steelers need to get a little bit more creative in the ways that they deploy those types of concepts moving forward. Then we'll talk about some individual players here. We'll start with Dylan Cook, who I think you got to lock him in at left tackle. It wasn't a perfect performance, but it was a very good performance. And as Mike Tomlin pointed out in the post-game press conference last night, you ran for 230 yards with this guy as your 4th left tackle, but I think he's got to be your 1st left tackle moving forward, all right? Even if somehow Broderick Jones can come back this year, Mike Tomlin has left the door open to that being a possibility. I would shut that down at this point because Dylan Cook has been, as good as any left tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers has been this season. All right, he's got really good technique. He gets out of his stance quickly. He's got good hand placement. He can readjust when he's beat. Like, he's got some really good tape over these last 2 weeks, guys, and he's got a shot. If he can continue this strong performance down the stretch, he could be this team's starting left tackle next year if he can beat out Broderick Jones in a camp battle. But then we get to the run blocking, and just in general, the run blocking was absolutely phenomenal in this game. I think adding Adam Thielen and MVS to the mix here, getting those bigger bodies out there has helped on the perimeter with the run blocking, but also the offensive line is dominating the line of scrimmage. The tight ends are doing their jobs for the most part. Jonnu Smith really isn't, but there's a number of super well-blocked plays in this game. Might have been the best run blocking performance for the Steelers all season long, and a performance that I specifically want to point out here is Connor Hayward, who played a couple snaps at fullback, and man, he had some really good reps as a blocker, especially on that second long touchdown run for Jaylen Warren. They're in the I formation. Connor Hayward just lays the boom on somebody, and that block opens up that giant lane for Warren to run through, and he ends up going 45 yards for a big-time touchdown. So Connor Hayward, not only is he the Steel City shove guy, but he's also a pretty decent fullback blocker, I guess. So kind of the jack of all trades in this Steelers offense. And he's been getting praise from guys like Rodgers and Tomlin and everybody else for the versatility he brings to the table. If you guys are enjoying today's content, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon. We're going to get into my defensive takeaways here in just a second. But now that we're midway through my film takeaways here, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon. It helps out the show. We really appreciate all of your guys' support. So now let's get into our defensive film takeaways, and we'll start with the tackling. And last week against Miami, I thought the tackling was really good. I thought this week, once again, the tackling stayed really consistent. Not a lot of missed tackles, and sometimes it really does come down to that. Like if you miss some tackles, you're gonna lose some. You're gonna make some big plays happen for the opposing team. All right, but if you wrap up, you do a good job, keeping things in front of you, and then bringing the guy to the ground, you can really have a consistent performance on defense. I thought the Steelers did that in this game. And then I want to give some props to Terrell Austin, who had some really creative, really good, exotic sim pressures in this game. And the Steelers have really dove into the sim pressure game more so over the last month, and I think that this defense, and especially the passing defense, has been better for it. And you guys know I've been advocating for four-man rushes all season long, all right, because I think that this team has enough talent to win with four, and you don't have enough talent on the back end to blitz as much as the Steelers were at the beginning of the season. But what a sim pressure is that it's a four-man rush with at least one linebacker, so inside linebacker, or defensive back blitzing, okay? And pretty much what you do is you drop out a defensive lineman into coverage or an outside linebacker into coverage, okay? And, the reason why I like sim pressure is because you can, get home with four, but you can find creative ways to scheme up pressure. You can even get some free rushers at times if you really fool the opposing offense, but you have the numbers in coverage, all right? So you don't have to sacrifice pressure to have the numbers in coverage. And I think the Steelers have kind of figured out that this is kind of the way that this defense plays really well. And over these last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of these, especially cover three sim pressure looks where they go out into just a normal cover three zone, but they find creative ways to shift things around in post-snap rotations, and then they send Ramsey or they send Duggar, who got a safety in this football game on a sim pressure, right? You can find creative ways, and then when you have, versatile outside linebackers like Alex Highsmith and Jack Sawyer and Nick Herbig and TJ Watt that can go out into coverage, you can really confuse opposing quarterbacks, and I think for the first 3 quarters in this game, they really did that to Jared Goff. In my opinion, guys, sim pressures have completely transformed this defense. They tried to play a lot of straight-up man coverage earlier in the season, and they've really become more of a true zone team. Down the stretch here, where they run a lot of these sim pressure looks, and they find creative ways to get into Tampa 2 or cover 3. And they keep everything in front of them, but they put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And I think they found that right formula. And I think Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin, 2 guys that get berated for never making adjustments, deserve a lot of credit for making that adjustment mid-season and bringing in guys like Asante Samuel Jr. and Kyle Duggar, these guys that have fit this system so beautifully. And I think that, this coaching staff does deserve some credit there. Then I want to talk about Derek Harmon here, who I thought was an absolute bully in this game. And then Keanu Benton was an absolute beast as well. And I think that these two are connected here because I think Benton is a lot better when Harmon's stabilizing presence is in there. Because when Harmon's in there and he can take on some of those double teams and he can kind of stabilize the run game, that means Benton is freed up to be more of a disruptor along the interior. And, I just think that Harmon is such an impressive human being, man. He went up against Penei Sewell one-on-one a number of times in this game, and he was winning those matchups. That might be the best right tackle in football, and a rookie out of Oregon coming off an injury that hasn't played in a few weeks comes right in and he's throwing him to the ground. It's absolutely incredible what we saw from Derek Harmon on film yesterday, in my opinion. And then Keanu Benton, man, I feel like he can be Keanu when he's out there with Derek Harmon and Cam Hayward, and when the linebackers can be trusted. You don't rely on Keanu Benton to hold that line of scrimmage as much when you've got Derek Harmon and Cam Hayward as stout as they are, and you can allow Keanu Benton to be the disruptor in the middle of your defense, and he certainly made more than his fair share of disruptive plays in this ball game. So big shout out to Keanu, and I think that he's going to continue to play really well as long as Derek Harmon and Cam Hayward are both healthy and in the starting lineup. All right, next up here on my defensive takeaways, another interior defensive lineman. I thought it was a really good day for the starting defensive lineman here. Cam Hayward is still balling out, man. He's so cerebral as a defensive lineman. There was a play where there's a misdirection play where they were faking a run to the right. Everybody except Cam falls for the cheese, and then Cam goes the other way where the run is actually going, the Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he shuts it down at the goal line. And that's a possession there where the Steelers made a goal line stand. So without Cam there, Detroit would have scored another touchdown. That might have been the game right there. So, Cam is still playing at a really high level, in my opinion. Now, there's some people that point to Cam Hayward's stats, and they're not like the flashiest numbers in the world. They're still very good. I would say, 3.5 sacks for a defensive lineman is still very good. 8 TFLs, all that stuff. But there's a lot of people, some condescending people on Steelers Twitter, are like, he's not getting the production that he complained about, all this different stuff he wanted to get paid for. But it's like Cam Hayward, when he watched the film, man, he's just as dominant as he's ever been, man. And he's a stabilizing force in the middle of this defense. He's a stabilizing force in this locker room. And I think that this team is abundantly lucky to have a guy like Cam Hayward leading this defense and leading this locker room. Then we get to Jack Sawyer, who I thought was really stout in his debut. Now, he's not dynamic. He's not going to get after quarterbacks and win one-on-one, all this different stuff in pass rushing. But I thought he set a really good edge. I think that obviously he had that big TFL in the red zone in the first quarter. He had a high motor too. He would never give up on plays. He's got the heart of a champion, man. And there's a reason why he was such a big part of that championship run for the Ohio State Buckeyes last year. And I think if he's going to be called upon in a playoff situation, he's not going to be afraid of that big stage. All right. I think they love that pedigree. I love the way that this kid plays the position. Even if he's not going to be like a star player for us, he can be a very good contributor for this defense moving forward, and I thought he had a really good performance. But then Alex Highsmith, I thought, was the guy that really showed up on film, and he really stepped up, man. He is so disruptive, and I've had some people on Steelers Twitter be like, you look at his numbers over the last 2 weeks, it's not that good, and it's like, well, that's why I don't box score watch. That's why I actually watch the film, man. And Alex Highsmith on film has been so disruptive. He's winning extremely quickly. These quarterbacks feel the need to get rid of the football really, really fast because of Highsmith's presence on the outside. He's making plays against the run, and he's also going out in coverage and making plays out there as well. His versatility is really, really special stuff, man. And I really think that he can be a number one edge rusher in this league. He's looked like it these last 2 weeks. On film. And, if you're somebody that says, you know what, we got Nick Herbig, we got TJ Watt, we got Jack Sawyer, we should probably trade one of our outside linebackers next year to get another high draft pick. If you're somebody that's saying, let's trade Alex Highsmith next year while his price is high, I think he's only raising his price tag right now with the way he's playing. And, if there's a team out there that needs a number one edge rusher and they're willing to give us, a late first round or like a second round pick for a guy like Alex Highsmith, a really dynamic, potential number one type of edge rusher, I would be willing to listen to those calls next offseason. But, he's such a big part of this defense this year. And I think it's such a luxury to have TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig all on the same defense. And if you can find a way to get all these guys healthy in time for the playoffs, watch out, man, because these guys are going to eat. Then we get to Jalen Ramsey, who had to go back to the nickel position where he started the season off this season with the Steelers defense. He ended up moving to safety where he's been the last several weeks. But then when Brandon Echols went down with his groin injury, they had to put Ramsey back in the nickel. And it's like riding a bike for him, apparently, man. He's still one of the best nickels in the league as far as I'm concerned. So good in run defense, good blitzer, all that different stuff. When he's close to the line of scrimmage, he can be a real impact guy. Now, I think he's been very good as a safety, and I think the plan moving forward is to keep him at safety long term because you have Brandon Echols under contract for another season. So I think they're going to keep him in the slot in 2026, and then they're going to probably keep Ramsey. And, we'll see if they keep Duggar or if, they're probably going to just put Deshaun Elliott back in his old spot next year. But, I think it's probably going to be Ramsey and Elliott at safety next year with Echols in the slot. But to know that you've got, a fantastic option in case Echols gets injured in the nickel position in Jalen Ramsey certainly puts some ease to my mind, with the way that the cornerback depth chart kind of falls here in Pittsburgh. Then we get to Joey Porter Jr., who continues to be an absolute menace with his go-go gadget arms, man. I mean, his arm length is truly, truly special. You just don't see it very often, which was really the selling point for him coming out of Penn State. But he has really turned that into his ultimate weapon. to become one of the top man corners in the National Football League, and that's really what he is. Now, he has his deficiencies in zone, and sometimes he does get a little too grabby, but he's done a lot better at that kind of stuff this year. He's starting to learn what he can get away with versus what he can't get away with in this league, and, he shut down Amon-Ra St. Brown on a number of routes yesterday. I think Joey Porter Jr. is playing one hell of a season. He is this team's lockdown number one corner when they want to go man coverage, and, I'm excited to see what this young man's going to do in the seasons to come. Now, in the fourth quarter, obviously the Lions were able to put up a lot of points and a lot of yardage, and a lot of Steelers fans, saw that result and said, well, the Steelers must have put their foot off the gas pedal. I actually don't think that was the case. Watching the film, the Steelers were still blitzing. They were still sending their sim pressures. They were still trying to get after the quarterback. They're still trying to be aggressive. It's just that Jared Goff, was kind of had his back up against the wall, and he just balled out. Like Mike Tomlin said in his post-game press conference, where it was more good Lions, stuff. I mean, it's the number one offense in the league heading into the week, as opposed to bad Steelers. Just because the Lions were moving the football doesn't necessarily mean the Steelers defense was playing terribly. Goff was throwing the ball into some really tight windows over the middle of the field. He was processing very quickly as well. And I think the only thing that you can maybe point to with the Steelers is that the pass rush slowed down a little bit in the fourth quarter, and that allowed Goff to hit some more downfield throws in that fourth quarter performance. But in my opinion, guys, it wasn't necessarily a terrible performance from the Steelers defense. It was more just Jared Goff catching fire, and the Steelers, unfortunately, were on the other side of that. But, I think late in the game, something that really killed the Steelers defense is that the Lions identified a double A-mug weakness that the Steelers have. And obviously, if you have two linebackers lined up in the A-gap, and then if you go out on a quick perimeter screen to the running back, those linebackers, if it's in man coverage, are not in position to go get that running back who they're technically responsible for in coverage. And, it's a very easy way for the Steelers to get out-schemed and outflanked. And we saw that quite a bit because the Steelers late in the game ran a lot of pressure, all right? They ran a lot of pressure on that final drive. And the Detroit Lions found some really good screen answers late in the game. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown ripped a big one there to get inside the red zone, and then Isaac Tesla almost had another one, almost got into the end zone for the game-winning score. So they found some, and then they had another one, Jahmyr Gibbs. So, the Lions found these kind of screen options that really exploited the Steelers' aggressiveness at the end of the game. But on one of those plays, Patrick Queen actually saved the day. Now, Patrick has been really up and down all season. He was up and down in this football game. He made some really good plays. There was other plays where he was out of position and didn't play all that well. But, when the game was on the line and the Steelers needed their uber athletic linebacker to make a play, he certainly did. So this was, in the final drive of the game here, they're sitting at the 11-yard line, 45 seconds left to go, and this is the pre-snap alignment. You guys can see here, Steelers are in a cover zero look here where they've got the two deep safeties. They're playing with leverage, but everybody else is up at the line of scrimmage, all right, including Patrick Queen, who's standing right here. Goff sees this because the Steelers actually played the same exact coverage on the previous play. All right, so they kind of had something ready if they called cover zero again, like Terrell Austin did, and they checked it to a wide receiver screen to slot receiver Isaac Tesla here, okay? And they know with the way the Steelers are aligned here that they are outflanked for that screen because you got two defenders on the other side there, and you got two blockers with a runner because the Steelers are sending all seven. So Queen ends up making the tackle from here. All right, so Tesla has the ball. He just caught the ball. You see the two blockers going in front of the two Steelers defenders. This is completely blocked up for the Lions. This should be an easy touchdown for Detroit. But Patrick Queen, who's standing right here and is completely outflanked. Like if he's a normal athlete, guys, he is not catching up to Isaac Tesla in this situation. But he hustles his ass off, gets to him just in time, takes him down at the 1-yard line, and of course the OPI happens and the false start happens, and then the rest of the drive happens. But if Patrick Queen doesn't make this play, the Pittsburgh Steelers lose the football game, barring some miracle from Aaron Rodgers on the final drive of the game with like 35 seconds left to go in the game, something like that. So big shout out to Patrick Queen for that big time hustle play, and shout out to the Steelers defense for holding strong on that final drive and getting this team that big time victory. Now I know today was a little bit of a longer one, guys. A true beast talking about DK Metcalf situation information and our film takeaways today. But if you made it to the end of today's show, that makes you a real one. So type those real ones down there in the comment section. I want to give you guys some love for making it to the end of today's show down there in the comments. So make sure you get those real ones down there. But that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for joining me here tonight. I'm going to have more Steelers content for you guys tomorrow morning and all throughout the week. Ponzi and I will be live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you guys join us tomorrow if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.